ran out of battery.
All right,
All right.
welcome, product fellows. Sorry, just Geshav to Hype lecture number two, validating hypothesis, design thinking, MVT testing. Have you heard of these terms before?
No. Yeah, no.
Okay.
Later, I've heard of MVP, like from
Uh-huh.
previous sessions, but that's it.
Okay, all right. So just picking up where we left off, you picked a subset of customers you want to target, check. You interviewed the customers, you understood the problems, you empathize with them, and you created really detailed user personas. And now you're like, okay, well, I understand the customer now. What's next? Well, basically, now is the time to think of a product that solves a problem that your customer is facing. And one of the number one reason why most startups fail and most products fail is because there's no product market fit. So you want to make sure that whatever project or product you're doing, that there's actually a demand, and you want to make sure that the demand is you want to be 100% sure the demand's actually there. Otherwise, you're just going to be wasting your time and energy. Well, not exactly wasting, but you're definitely it'll just fail. So product market fit, baby. All right. What? Oh, okay.
All right, cool. So I'll just go ahead and carry on for Derek since he's dealing with his family right now. Yeah, so have you heard of the term product market fit?
Um, I haven't heard of it, but I can sort of somewhat intuit what it means.
Yeah, for sure. So product market fit is actually not a term that you should throw around very lightly. I learned this like working at different VC firms. Um, they use that term very rarely, and they literally only consider product market fit if you're making like millions of dollars and like you're growing like a rocket ship. But essentially, product market fit is when you have a product and its features solve the problems of a market really, really well and of those users really, really well. So a lot of the time you hear these stories of companies. So for instance, Slack was not a messaging company when it started out. When Slack first started out, they were trying to create a virtual world where people could like meet each other and play games together. And then they had an internal chat that everybody used to play that game, right? So at that moment, Slack did not have product market fit because people didn't need that problem to be solved. They didn't need that like online virtual world where people could talk to each other and go hang out. What they needed was the chat system that powered the online virtual world. And so they achieved product market fit once they realized, hey, screw it, scrap the game. Let's just work on the chat system that we had built out for this game and try to go sell it to people and see, it worked really well for our team. So let's go try and sell it to other people. And then they really found their product market fit with the chat application that powers sort of enterprise businesses or startups or sort of like student organizations to have dedicated channels of communication. So that's an example of product market fit. And yeah, that's a really good example that I can think of. So. Cool. Derek, could you hit the next slide, my friend? Awesome. So now let's talk a little bit about design thinking. Have you guys heard of design thinking? Sort of. Yeah.
Sort of,
So
yeah.
yeah. So I mean, there are a lot of buzzwords thrown around in the startup and tech space. So sort of like what we're trying to teach you in TPEO and through these product lectures are these buzzwords so you can be in the know. There's a lot of vernacular, a lot of colloquial diction that's used. All design thinking is it's a process used to brainstorm solutions to a problem. And you sort of start with the user personas that we talked about last week. It's, empathizing with your users, right? So like stepping into your user's shoes, interviewing them, understanding what's going wrong. The second thing is really just once you have done all these interviews and once you've talked to your users, consolidate all of those interviews into definite and defined problems that you can solve, right? And once you have those problems, you can either try to solve for all of them or focus on the most important one, which is sort of the same process that we use for product design thinking when you're answering a product design question. So keep this in mind whenever you're going into interviews and people are asking you to design a new problem or design a new product to solve a problem. So you focus on one of those problems. And then once you have that clear problem, a large amount of time is spent on brainstorming and thinking about potential solutions to these ideas. So if you've ever seen one of those offices where they have a whole bunch of sticky notes on a wall and every single sticky note has an idea, that's sort of the brainstorming process. And that's that brainstorming phase. And a really key thing about this is, there are no bad ideas. This was really pioneered by this firm called IDEO. And IDEO is based in Silicon Valley. They are a consulting company that are hired by a whole bunch of different firms to really come up with solutions to their problems. So for example, IDEO helped design one of the first iMac designs. If you guys know the super colorful iMac design, IDEO helped design that. They also helped design, I think, one of the first mouses to control. So, this design thinking process is a lot more complicated when you go online and when you look it up, but this is sort of like the basic steps. Once you sort of have a good list of ideas, you start paring down those ideas until you find the ones that everyone sort of likes the most. And then with the most promising ideas, you can combine them together into a prototype, or if they're more standalone, you can do individual prototypes to go and test your hypotheses and to test whether this idea would actually solve the problem at a base level. So an example of this would be if my idea to provide extra housing for a convention is to create Airbnb, how can I prototype that without actually going out and creating a marketplace and creating a website? It's pretty easy. You essentially just create a Google form, say, hey, if you want to stay in San Francisco, what's your price range? Here are a list of different homes. And you can just create like a Google form, Google Sheets, and that would be sort of like a prototype. And if that successfully works, then obviously go out and go create a more fleshed out product. Next slide. Cool, Derek, do you want to hop back in and handle the design thinking example? Derek? Derek Wu.
You guys hear me?
Yes,
Yep.
we can hear you.
Okay, but like my sister's taking an exam, so I have to be really quiet apparently. So unless you want to cover it, Jonathan.
Derek, can you like not cover this at all?
I mean, I can, but like I just
Okay, yeah, could
I
you
don't wanna, like,
please?
disturb my sister. Okay, so basically for a design thinking example, we're gonna be walking through what what a solar company in Africa named Mobisol did in order to provide off-the-grid solar electricity in rural areas. And so basically we're gonna go through the different steps of the empathize process, and the first part is really what we talked about last week, really understanding the problem that people face, talking to customers, interviewing them, and then and so writing down the key observations you really find when you're talking out with the users. And so Mobisol, what they found out was that people really need electricity for radio, TV, and lights, because at that time they had existing solar panels, but it was mostly they only generate enough power to power the lights of their village or lights of their house. And they also found out, because it was a relatively like poor village, there wasn't a lot of infrastructure to save up money, because there are no real like locked doors. Everything was like there are no real windows, and so the house, like, you really couldn't like save any money because it could just get stolen, right? And there was no banks in this village too as well. And what they found was that even though there was like a lot of locked doors, a lot of private belongings, like not there weren't like a lot of valuable ones, but like the ones that they did have were really well kept and respected. And finally found that the prior solar panels, a lot of them just didn't work, right? And so when you talk about like defining a problem, you want to take these observations of your customers and put them into and categorize them into problems, right? And so they found was that the demand, the problem was really the demand for electricity was way higher than just for lighting. They learned that people really, like, if they got money, like, they would spend it immediately. Even if they cover the basic needs, they would just buy where they could, because they couldn't save their money, right? And they also found out, the people will not take care of rental property as well as their own property. And finally, that people just really can't maintain the solar panels by themselves, right? Like they need like they there needs to be a way for them to ensure that they can keep these solar panels working even if they're broken. Okay, so then looking at the problems and try to think of solutions or different ideas, right? And this is usually a really involved process, and there are like different methods of brainstorming. But one good way is to work in a team and just simply suspend your judgment. Like try to list as many ideas as you can, and not and like basically don't cast any judgment to the different ideas, even if they're like super out there and super wacky. You want to list them out because eventually you might be able to refine a really wacky idea and turn it into idea that you actually like use, right? And so their ideas are really, to how large solar panels like in power appliances. That one's like pretty obvious. And then in order to solve the problem where people really couldn't save money, they'd have monthly payment options to pay for the solar panels. And then because these payment installments eventually end, once they paid off the solar panel, they would be able to keep it. And so they'd be incentivized to take care of the solar panels. And finally, this is probably the most innovative idea to solve the issue of maintenance. They decided to use existing infrastructure, right? Because in these villages, there would be watchmakers or mechanics that would like repair like different like trucks or like watches and stuff like that. And so they certify existing tradesmen in these villages to repair the solar panels if they broke, and they create a training program for that. And then when they came to prototyping and testing, okay, so let me show you the last slide. But they found out that people were really interested in those solar panels. So they created a product that really seemed to fit the needs of the villagers. But what they found was that through the prototype and MVP testing, there was something they didn't realize, and that was that there wasn't really a proper last mile distribution channel for the solar panels. And so they're thinking about utilize, and so like now they're thinking about, oh, we're going to try to use drones to deliver these solar panels, or we're going to try to use like existing infrastructure that delivers food and other like materials to the villages to deliver these solar panels that partner with them. And so it's a lot about like thinking an idea, bringing it to market as quickly as possible, and then getting feedback. So it's a very iterative process. And a lot of times when I know you guys aren't like as familiar with MVP, but basically it stands for minimum viable product. And so that's a product with nothing but the most essential features, right? And you basically don't want to add anything extra, because the idea is if the basis or the core of your product can't do well with early adopters, the market at large is not going to adopt your product, right? I mean, it seems a little bit counterintuitive, but once you think about it, it makes sense, right? Because no matter very rarely, if you add more bells and whistles and polish your product, is the market going to adopt it, right? Like even if you think of the iPhone, right? The first iPhone, it didn't have SMS, or no, it had SMS, but it didn't have MMS, which was you couldn't text pictures on the original iPhone, and there was no App Store on the original iPhone either, right? But yet, there like people really still like the idea of having the like touchscreen smartphone, and so they bought it, and so eventually, when Apple later on polished the product, it became even more successful and best selling. Even if the iPhone initially didn't sell very well, there's at least some market demand within the early adopters.
Yeah, and I'm just going to go ahead. Oh, wait, Derek, do you have more to say?
Well, I was going to say, like, when it comes to software, like, don't like complete, like, especially in terms of like software products, like, don't build out everything. Like, don't make it like super polished. Just get out like the minimal functioning like software product, even if there's like some bugs, and just get out to market and see and get that feedback.
Yeah, so I'll say whenever I was first learning how to create software, and I was first coming up with ideas, just like a lot of people, and maybe this doesn't apply to you guys, but I was coming up with these like fabulous ideas where I would essentially have to recreate Facebook. Like, I wanted to create like a sports app where you could connect with other people in your community to play sports. You could meet them. You could have like an XP ranking system, all that stuff. Now that's a great idea. I still think it should be made and everything, but it just is way too much. And you have to realize how much bandwidth you have and your team has, and how much time it'll take to actually create features. Like that's one of the most important things that you have as a product manager. It's your skill to estimate how long things take to be created. And because of that, like what Derek is saying, that entire concept of the minimum viable product, of paring down all of the features into your just main feature. Like, what is your main feature? And like, what is the problem that it's solving? And what is that main value proposition that you're trying to solve? And create one feature at a time. And have each one of them be sort of experiments where you create that bare feature that should be able to solve that bare minimum problem, send it out there, see what people react to it. Because if it is a big enough problem that they're willing to use a bare bones feature, then you know that you're on the right track and that you're solving something correct. Like, I actually was on a call today. Oh, shoot. This is recorded, but I was on a call for the VC firm that I work for a company that does, oh God, I really hope I'm not disclosing stuff that I'm not supposed to, but they essentially provide information for the supply chain. So for like truckers, if you have like a large trucking shipment that's worth like lots of money, so say like in the 100K range, one thing that occurs really often that's a pain point is like the supplies get lost or the supplies get damaged, and it just happens throughout the process. You know, when you're having one of these cross-country trips, it just gets all messed up. And for the minimum viable products, all they did was they just took a GPS tracker and they stuck it on one of these shipments, and they tried to sell that. They're like, hey, we're now giving like GPS tracking shipments. And they didn't have any proprietary technology. They literally just stuck a GPS tracker on there and gave that data to people in a live feed, and people loved it. So that's sort of how they did the basis testing to understand that, hey, there's actually a problem. And, you know, now they've sort of iterated upon that, giving more features like what's the humidity, what's the temperature, all these different things that are really important to people shipping their products. So all that being said, you guys are product managers. You're going to have a lot of ideas. You're going to have these grand visions. Focus on what the most important problem you're solving is. Understand the bare minimum number of features that you can to create that, and then go from there before you create something. Because I promise you, when you go through tech, when you see people starting their projects, like, I cannot tell you how many times people have come up to me being like, hey, can you talk to me about the technical feasibility of this application or this project? And they literally want to recreate Facebook, like, but for their own world, right? Like, oh, I want to have a chat functionality, a matching functionality, like a marketplace functionality, and everything. But like, it's a team of people who don't know how to code, right? So just keep that in mind. Very important.
Bro, but I can handle the business side.
Me too, Derek. A monkey could handle the business side.
True though.
I'm kidding, but not well. Like, obviously there's some nuance to that, but yeah.
Yeah. And anyways, like, I think the agile methodology makes it pretty easy for you to do MVP testing. So they kind of go hand in hand.
Yeah.
And in terms of Mosa's impact to date, you know, they've had some big impacts. You can just read off the site if you want. But going off what Jonathan said, a lot of times, like, even with software products, you don't even need to code. Like, you might be able to like run a marketing campaign, or just like try to sell the product before you actually create it to see if there's any interest. You can also have something where you like do it, like where you have a concept, like where you have basically somebody in the back, like actually doing the product, like doing it manually. So I don't know how to explain it. Like, maybe you have like a Google form for, like, let's say like Instacart, right? For Instacart competitor, you might initially start off with like a Google form where people submit different orders, and then you put into Excel spreadsheet, and you hire a bunch of like people on Craigslist, where you do it yourself, you drive to the store and then deliver it to them, right? That's a really simple way to MVP test, right? And I think, like, especially with MVP testing, it's, you'll know if your product is successful, right? Or you'll know what to do from there. Or where your like short-term product roadmap is from there. Because, you know, like, let's say I do have this Instacart thing, and there ends up being more orders than I can handle, or more orders than my spreadsheet can handle. and it's time to make it more legit, time to actually add the tech stack and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Also,
Go ahead, Derek.
and then finally, you can just build like the single like main feature of your product and see if there's any traction.
Yeah, so I would sort of double down on like the smoke test stuff and like the sell before you build. Like, a lot of people do this. They'll literally just create a website from some sort of template online, and the call to action will be enter in your email so that when we launch, we'll let you know. And you have like a clear one-liner description of your unique value proposition and sort of what your product offers. And sometimes people will like spend a couple hours, create a hype video, post it on Kickstarter, and just see if people vibe with the idea. And then if they do, they can like, they can gather whether or not people are interested in it, and it can be really, really useful. So
Yeah, and
this is a good
that's
way.
exactly what Dropbox did. So the problem was that they were trying to solve initially was that, if you look at this comic, people really like sharing files was kind of a pain in the ass in the early 2000s. And so the idea was just to have a file synchronization software that kind of worked like magic. And initially, like Dropbox like went to different VCs, and like the VC firm just like, bro, there's no market demand. Like in this house is like different from any other like file synchronization software that we have. And so what Dropbox did was they created this video. And basically he like edited this video, right? It is showing off what Dropbox could be, and posted on Reddit, and then eventually like it exploded on Reddit, and that's how he got traction and eventually convinced the VC firms to invest with him. And if you want to watch the video, we can watch it now.
Was this fake or was it real?
This is fake. So like he has not coded anything so far, or I don't know. Well, it just wasn't complete. I'm not sure if he actually did start coding, but this is like just the ideal Dropbox.
Tour of Dropbox, which is a new way to store and share files online. What makes Dropbox different is that it just works, and there isn't any complicated setup or interface to learn. So let's get started. I've already installed Dropbox on a Windows PC and put a bunch of files in, and now I want to sync these files to my Mac. So to do that, I just installed Dropbox, and now I'm linking my Mac to my account. So in a second, my account will be linked, and you can see that the files that were on my Windows PC will start coming down. And what we're looking at is my Dropbox folder, which looks and acts like any other folder except for two things. One, these little green icons that indicate files are up to date. And two, anything in my Dropbox is synced across all of my computers into the web. And you'll notice that when I make changes, everything syncs up pretty quickly. And as another example, I'm going to log in my Windows PC, where you'll see that not only are the changes from my Mac already here, but if I make another change to a file, so for example, this picture of a platypus, and then I hit save, the change begins uploading immediately. And when I go back to my Mac, the change is reflected in a matter of seconds. So the point is, if you've ever worked with multiple computers or carried around a USB drive or emailed yourself files from work, you can see this is a much easier way of managing your stuff. And we also protect you from the bad things that can happen to your files. So if I delete a bunch of stuff, we have this web interface where you can not only get to your files in case you're not at one of your computers, so here are the contents of my Dropbox here, but we have this Show Deleted Files link where you can select a file that you've deleted, and then you have an option to bring it back in a couple of clicks. So I'll do that, and instantly the file's back. And not only do you have the option of restoring the most recent version, but actually any prior version of a file, because every time you make a change, Dropbox saves a snapshot. And Dropbox is also very efficient about the way it handles changes to files and sends only the pieces that change. So in the case of the platypus picture, just sending the delta saved over 80% of the bandwidth. So that covers a lot of how we make it easy to access and protect your own files, but the other half of what we do revolves around making it really easy to share and put files online. So normally if I want to share something, I have to send an email attachment or something like that. But Dropbox has this special public folder where every file you put in here has a URL associated with it. So I can get a public link, and then I can paste that into an IM window or an email or a blog post, and it does what you'd expect. So that's great for individual files, but we also make it possible to share entire folders. So all I have to do is right-click any folder, and then there's this option to share. And then all I have to do is enter in email addresses of people I want to share the folder with. And then when I hit share, the folder that's on my computer will also appear on their desktops. And as a better example of this, I'll actually accept an invitation from one of my friends who invited me to join his shared folder. So when I hit accept, inside my Dropbox, there will appear this Dropbox Trade Secrets folder with files from his computer in there. And then when I put files inside, those will appear on his desktop instantly. And then when I refresh, you can see the changes reflected. Okay, so shared folders are great for collaborating on projects, or sharing documents, or photos, or music, or any kind of file. But the last thing I'm going to show you is the easiest way to put photos online. So Dropbox comes with this built-in photo gallery, which is probably a lot like the ones you've seen before, except that the difference is ours is tightly integrated into the desktop. And I'll show you what I mean. So if you have a folder full of photos, like this one here, all you have to do is drag it into the special photos folder inside your Dropbox. And when you refresh the photo gallery, Dropbox actually creates a photo album with the same name. And all of your albums include these secret links that you can then share. So hopefully that gives you an idea of how much easier Dropbox makes it to share files. And with that, we'll wrap up. We're still in private beta, but you can visit us and sign up to give it a shot at www.getdropbox.com. Thanks.
Yeah, so just a couple of things to note. Notice how you said private beta, which basically means that at this point he hadn't completed the backend. He was just trying to figure out whether or not there was support or interest in his product. And then you also notice that, well, because he posted this on this video on Reddit, he was really targeting tech-savvy users and people who would be most likely be his early adopters, right? And finally, you notice that there's like memes to keep the people on Reddit like happy, right? So there's like pictures like Steve Ballmer's face, Obama, blowing up a car, stuff like that.
Yeah, sort of going off that idea of Reddit, I highly recommend whenever you're doing a product launch to just post stuff on Reddit. People on the internet, especially on Reddit, are going to be stupid honest. And then also with Reddit, you're able to target niches, right? So if you're targeting like music lovers, you can post it in a music lover subreddit. Or if you think that your product might be better for enterprise SaaS people, you can post it in like an enterprise SaaS subreddit. When I was launching Spotify Buddy, which is an application that I created this summer for people to listen to music together synchronously live on Spotify, I posted it on Reddit and I posted it in like a whole bunch of different forums. And I got like over like 800 upvotes or something like that, or like something close to that of people. And they gave a lot of like really good feedback. Yeah. So yeah, exactly. Yeah. So not 800, but 750. And I got like a lot of really good feedback on the product and like what they liked about it, what they didn't like about it. And unfortunately, like a week after I released it, I had like 5,000 users from Reddit, but yeah, like a week after I launched this, Spotify came up with their own version of the feature, which was, kind of tough, but at the same time, like it gives you an idea of how useful posting it into like sort of these sub communities can be. So I highly recommend utilizing this technique of going on Reddit. And then another thing, whenever you're launching a product, if you have like the full launch, you can launch it on Product Hunt. But what Product Hunt is also really useful for is maybe you don't even have a product that's all the way done, but if you launch it here and you have like a video sort of showcasing like what you want to create, it can be really good. And you can also create sort of those landing pages that we were talking about earlier on Product Hunt, where you can go and just create a page that says, hey, here's what our product is. Are you interested? Join the private beta kind of thing. Yeah. So
I had a follow-up.
Yeah, go for it, Ben.
So you guys mentioned Reddit and like Kickstarter and Product Hunt. Are those like pretty reliable places like for any product in general? Or like, I'm gonna give a very random example. Like if you had tech for like elderly or something, like could you still go to Kickstarter and get reliable feedback, or at that point you'd want to go somewhere else?
So you wouldn't want to do it for Kickstarter.
Yeah.
Kickstarter is when people are usually trying to create like a physical product and they need funding before they can go out and create it. In terms of like Reddit or Product Hunt, yeah, I would definitely post it online for Reddit or Product Hunt. People post all sorts of stuff, and if they want to give feedback, they'll give feedback. So I think it's a very valuable thing that you can do. If you're looking for like, people who have elderly parents and you're targeting them, you can find that community on Reddit. Like I promise you, it'll be there.
Okay.
Although
And then
I would say
Go ahead, Derek.
Reddit's like skews slightly younger, so you need either go to a specific subreddit or maybe try like Facebook, like go to like a Facebook group for old people, and then
Facebook groups work too. Yeah. Like an example of a Facebook group. So there's this startup in Austin called Hitch, and they actually got funded by the venture capital firm that I worked for, like the last summer, the summer before this summer. They're essentially an Uber, but for long distance travel from city to city. And before they ever created an application, they created a Facebook group, or they invaded the Facebook group for city to city rideshare. And they paid off the owner of that Facebook group to sort of take it over and have all of their rides go through Hitch. And so that was sort of where they first started getting their business. They would offer their services on that Facebook group. And they saw that Facebook group, and that's what they used to validate their market. So you just got to be creative with it. Like, just understand, where can you find the people who are your target users, and how can you see whether they really like this?
That's right. All right. Cool. All right. So now we're gonna move on to exercise. I want you guys to imagine that you're at the beginning of the project currently signed on, and that you're the PM. Obviously, like because the products are assigned, right? You can't really validate the project, and because of the meeting, you can't really do it. But how would you go about validating your current project if you were the PM initially?
You can take some time and think about it. You don't have to answer it right away. So we'll give you guys like a minute and a half.
So I'm on the SG Connect team, and like for us, I think you could say you technically have like two different kinds of users. You have one, like a student who wants to submit a like problem or something to student government, and then student government's using it to address those concerns. So in terms of validation, I think right now we have like bare bones functionality, and I think one way that we could do it is like I don't know how, are there like forums or something for UT students in general that they see, but like post it on there and get feedback from them, or even post it on like some kind of UT Reddit. I was also talking to Kevin and seeing if we could like even just get on some calls with UT students and just give them the product and see how they use it, and if it's intuitive enough for them to like go through it and use it as it should. And then on the student government side, like I think one is observe how they currently deal with any issues or requests that they get from students, and then see if our product like is too much of a hassle to adopt, or it's very similar to what they currently do and it's pretty intuitive.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. Sort of like what you talked about, putting it in front of the users. If you were to sort of like make it even more simple, like how would you validate it at a much more simple level, rather than just assume you don't even have the product that you guys have already created. Like, how would you do it?
Yeah. So I guess one like very easy way to do it is just like give people a Google form that would allow them to submit requests and even see if people do submit requests in the first place. Because if people aren't trying to communicate with student government in the first place, like there's no way they're going to use a fully fledged out platform. So yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, and for Launchpad, so if there's yes, so for Launchpad, if we have a MVP, then we could go to and because you sort of like similar to SG Connect, because you sort of need both like students to upload their profiles and you need sort of a user base of orgs and startups. You can sort of choose like a particular niche like I like ECE students or CS students and go for like choose one org like IEEE and sort of go to like say a Reddit or a Facebook group and sort of like specifically for those majors, post it on that and have sort of the officers of that one particular org like talk about it in their first general meeting and sort of see. I don't know, sort of sorry. So just post it on sort of the Facebook group of the majors and sort of see what the interest is from there. And if you even if you don't have MVP, you can sort of take a similar approach with the Google form, and that would be sort of a simple way to gauge interest.
Yeah, makes sense. Good stuff. I guess like with marketplaces, it is a bit easier just to sort of like validate that that sort of need. I know whenever I was sort of validating need for Swipe Me In, my sophomore year, I think I created like a Facebook group or something of that sort where like people could sell meals like very easily without going through an application. And there were a ton of people who wanted to sell meals. So I was like, oh, cool, let's do it. But yeah, good stuff. Derek?
I mean, just like since Brand and I were both in UT Builders, we can kind of speak to how we validated it. So,
Go for it.
basically, right around the time we were signing projects, there was a UT Entrepreneurship Week, and so there were a bunch of entrepreneurs and people interested in startups attending these different events. And so we just sound like we'd be at the front of each event asking them, hey, like, are you interested in working for a startup? Like, would you mind filling out this quick survey? So we kind of like did like we kind of like empathize with the user and did a little bit of like user validation at the same time. And then we like after we did realize, oh yeah, this is a big problem. We also talked to the head of the Blackstone Launchpad, and she was like, oh yeah, like this is also a big issue. Like a lot of people, they want to work on these startups and they just, you know, like there's just no way for them to find out what startups are available. And finally, I know that I have a couple of friends who are in Cell, and they were looking for like co-founders, because a lot of the people in Cell, they're like business majors or like CS like non-technical backgrounds. They're looking for more technical people to join the companies, and so it's just a combination of those three factors.
Yeah, great. Thanks for sharing that, Derek. Once again, the second week, it's not rocket science what we're teaching you guys, but it's the foundation for everything that you're going to do in the future. And you might not see it now. I know I see it now, like sort of like looking back over my years. I used to think that, design thinking, this user stuff, I was like, oh, does it really matter? I'm pretty sure you just come up with an idea and then the idea is good. You go make it and you go call it a day. But like I literally thought that. But after going and working for companies and seeing big processes and going through the interview process, it is really important to always start with the users. Like in interviews and in companies, before you create any product, you have to focus on the users and you have to go through this process. And I've found that going through this design thinking process and the brainstorming process has actually helped so much in my ability to create products and to come up with really awesome needs. And yeah, hopefully you'll get to learn from our mistakes and you'll use these frameworks and you'll make sure to focus on your users when you're going out and creating products in the future. But do you guys have any questions? If not, we can sort of end it early. I'll stop recording and we can sort of just like talk about how our week's been going. Cool.
Yeah.
All right. Awesome. All right, I'll stop recording.